This is Diana Sullivan in Austin, Texas. Recently, I put up a video showing how to make a hemmed, that is double warm ribbing using latched ribbing. But I had a question about how to do it using the ribbing attachment. I have two methods for you, and they're both very interesting. The first method is easy. It uses waste yarn, but you put it on the bottom in a circular setup, then you switch to ribbing for your garment yarn, and you get a good looking front and a good looking back, nice join on your hem. My second method I did without any waste yarn at all. So this first video is doing it with waste yarn, and the second video will be without waste yarn. I have set up my bulky machine and ribber. Now this should work on any machine with a ribbing attachment. A few of the settings might be different, but if you've been working on your ribbing, you should know how to do these settings. All I'm going to use is knit one, purl one ribbing and circular knitting. Now let me start by picking out needles. I'm just doing a small sample. I was thinking maybe 25 stitches. So I'm picking out every other needle on the main bed, and then in between I'm picking out every other needle on the ribber, and I'm just having the end needles be on the main bed. Oh, I need one more there. I like to go across and back just to even them up. This begins with scrap yarn. The scrap yarn simply functions as a stitch holder. Now let's look at our carriage settings. The main bed and ribber carriage are set for plain knitting. I'm on the N here on this PRN lever, and the N here. I'm on the R here, and I'm on tension 3, not what you usually do. And then up here, I'm going to put this one on tension 3, and I have no buttons pushed. It's plain knitting. I'm going to do a big zigzag row with scrap yarn. I'm threading up with some white waste yarn. I'm going to knit from right to left, and it makes a big zigzag row. Let's zoom in on that a little. I have a short standard gauge comb, and it works fine on this bulky machine. I am putting a clothespin on the end of the yarn that's loose. That keeps a little bit of weight on the end stitch so it'll knit through. And I just put this comb on, and then what I'm about to do may surprise you. My carriage is on the left. I'm putting on a large weight. I'm leaving my tension on 3, but I'm changing my settings. I am setting up for circular. I am lifting the right PR lever on the ribber and pushing the left part button on the main carriage. This is circular, and I am going to do a few rounds of circular, but end on the right. Now that was 7 rounds. That's plenty. Our next job is to change yarn to the garment yarn. I'm cutting this white yarn. It's still threaded in this feeder. My garment yarn is this dark rose color, and I'm going to tie it to the white yarn, just an overhand knot. Then I need a hook. This is my latch tool, and it's open. I just want to grab this piece of white yarn, so I go between the beds, grab that yarn, and pull down until only the rose yarn is showing in the feeder. And then I've got a clothespin down there already. I'll move it onto that white yarn just to hold that down. I also always check and make sure that it's still threaded properly in the feeder. Now we need to change our settings. We want to be on plain knitting. I'm still on tension 3, but I push this lever down, and then I use the cancel on the main bed and pop out all the buttons. So it's going to do knit one, purl one ribbing now. I have to stop and think for a moment, how many rows do I want to do of ribbing? Well, it's a hem. It's folded up. It's doubled. So if I wanted 8 rows of ribbing, I would need to knit 16 rows because when I fold it, half of it is out of sight. So let's do 16 rows of ribbing. My first row, I kind of keep an eye on it. Make sure it knitted nicely, cool. And now I'll do the other 15 of the 16 rows. I want to end up by putting all the stitches up on the main bed. I need to do that, otherwise I can't drop the ribber and fold the hem. So I've got my double-eyed tool and I'm just going to switch these up to the main bed. Do look in the description box below the video because I will link some videos about ribbing. If you want to get to know your ribber, I'm here to help. We paid an awful lot for the ribber. It's like buying a whole second knitting machine, and we should get more out of it than just a few edgings. So I have books and resources about that. I have videos about it. Lots of interesting information. Okay, with all the stitches on the main bed, I can drop the ribber. And I can see my ribbing in there. I'm going to use a ribber cover. Before I do much of anything with this, I want to make sure that the stitches don't drop. And it helps me a lot to just push them back firmly. That way there's some pressure on them, they don't just fall off. I'm taking the comb off so that we can see what we have. I want to get in really close to show you a little bit about the shape and the formation of a knit stitch at the bottom of ribbing. These little loops at the very bottom, here's one. If you examine it, it's not a stitch. It's what we call a sinker loop. It's the loop between stitches. This little loop is between this purl stitch and this knit stitch. And here's another loop between the same purl stitch and the next knit stitch. Well, you might ask, how's that pertinent? Well, it helps you figure out what to pick up and how hems work. Because let's say that each of my fingers represents a stitch, a loop of yarn at the top, hanging on a needle. 1, 2, 3, 4. The in-between stitches, there'll always be one less. You see there are only 3? For 4 loops here, there are only 3 loops in between them. So if I had 25 loops here, there are only 24 down here. Every time you pick up a hem, be aware that you're going to be 1 stitch short. Now let's look at exactly what to pick up down there. I have zoomed in just as closely as my camera will go, and we're going to look at what to pick up down here. And what we want to do is look for the column of knit stitches. Each knit stitch is a V with 2 legs. So here is our first knit stitch, which goes all the way to the top to the second needle. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a transfer tool, poke it in the middle of the bottom stitch of that column, and then poke it out toward the left. And we're going to put that on our first needle. Then we're going to take the tool, poke it in the same little V, poke it out toward the right, and put that on our second needle. We're going to do this on a cross. So this is my next knit stitch. I'm getting this loop here from the inside of the V toward the outside, and then here's the other side All I really need to do is get one strand of the yarn. I don't want to get the row above it or any of the waste yarn, just that one strand. And I go in the center each time, out toward the left and fill the next empty needle, and then in the center, out toward the right and fill the next empty needle. And I'm going to do this right on across. I think you can see that this is going fairly quickly. I don't worry about the purl stitches. I don't need to. These loops are connected to those purl stitches. Trust me, they're going to be stuck on. And you might ask me, why do I go in the middle of the V each time and then go out and then go middle of the V and out to the other direction? Why do I do that? Well, I do that because that results in a pickup that doesn't twist the loop. And that gives me a smoother pickup. If I twisted everything all across, then it would be tighter and it would be lumpier, and we want a smooth pickup. At the end here, I'm going to be one stitch short, remember? So I have this one V left. I go in and put it on that one. Then I go in it and come out the other way and put it on that one. And I end up with one needle that only has one loop on it. Now we're going to go and just do ordinary knitting on the main bed. And it's helpful to put a claw weight on each end. It is also helpful when picking up hems, since the machine has to pull the needles out and push them back in. I like to just pull them out the sides. They aren't evened up. You see, some are poked out more than others. But this way, the machine slides across and they're all at the same place as the machine crosses. So it will push them back and knit them through as it goes across. Now let's change the ribber coupler to the regular sinker plate. So I unscrew those, put the regular sinker on. I also need to rethread, and I also need to think about my tension. If I did this ribbing on tension 3, how tight I want the rest of the garment is going to be up to me. Let's say I want it on 5. Well, this first closing row, I kind of like to go up one, so I'm running it up to 6. And then I'm going to knit that first row. I knit that first row. It closes the hem. I put the tension back down on 5 because I decided I wanted it to be 5. And then I knit some rows of stockinette to finish my sample. I like to end on the right, and then I'm going to do a loop through a loop bind off because it's such a nice sample. I think I'll keep it. So I need one loose row. I will link in the description of this video how to do a loop through a loop bind off. It is a favorite bind off for me because it looks like a hand knitter's bind off. It has a good looking edge. However, it's not stretchy, so this is not your bind off when you need things to stretch a lot. And you need that last loose row. Now, I've got videos that show how to do it in other ways, but in this situation, I could turn it all the way up from 5 to 10, even a little past 10, and get that last loose row, and that's always enough looseness for this bind off. This goes quickly, and do you see the nice chain edge that it forms? So it is a good looking finished bind off. Fast and very good for my swatches. I already cut the yarn on the left, so when I get to the last stitch, I'm going to pull the loose end through the last loop, and that'll finish my bind off. if you need to stretch your bind off, you could do it with a tapestry needle, and that will work. A back stitch will be stretchy. Oh, let's look at the thing. Well, here's our sample. Here's the knit side and the purl side. We need to get that waste yarn off, don't we? Let's look at how to do that. This was never meant for anything but a stitch holder, and this was the beginning edge of this yarn, so I'm not doing anything with that. And then this was the ending edge of the yarn. What I'm going to do is go to the left hand end of this and take a snip, this loop right before the pink. That means that if I pull this end, half of this will fall off. Remember, it was circular knitted. So I pulled that, and look, it unfolds, and the whole back half of it fell off. Well, I still need to get the front half off. So over here, I've got an end. See? Over here, there's an end. Over here, I'm going to make an end. I'll take a snip, and I'll pull that off. This, to me, is easier than fooling around with ravel cord. Now let's really examine what we have and how it turned out. This is always going to look thick right here. There's always going to be a bump because we're going from one layer of fabric to two, plus ribbing. Because of the stitch formation, each layer of the ribbing is thicker than a layer of stockinette. So that's how the front looks. You see it's very even and very professional looking. But there's one thing I always like to do to make this look even better. I get something long like a hand knitting needle, and I put it in the middle of my hem and pull my hem. That just evens the stitches up a little. So there we go. I've done my little tug to even up and set the stitches. Now you're probably wondering whether the back side also looks good. We want everything we do to look as good as we can make it. One of the important keys to beautiful knitting is good finishing. Check this out. I think it looks really good. And there we have it, our doubled ribbing. Now, if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe to my channel. I think you will see one of the broadest assortments of techniques on my channel that you will see anywhere. I was actually the first person to give full-on lessons on YouTube because I was just so anxious to teach people to machine knit. Now that was back in 2009. I also have an invitation to you in my links in the description box to join my Facebook group. We have a wonderful group, and it's knitting only. This is not a spammy group. It's moderated, it's all knitting. It's not about anything personal, just what you're doing with your knitting. And I have found that everyone there is really helpful when people have questions. So I hope you'll join us. I also have a link to my blog, which has lots of ideas and free patterns and lessons and just general information, and a link to my shopping site. Anyway, see you at the next video.